My name is Nanette LaFront, and I'm the president of the Graduate Student Society. So this is a graduate student event, and it was just started this year, and it's kind of an interesting story. The 3M or 3 Minute Thesis was started in the University of Queensland in 2008. And it is a great way for graduate students to present their thesis within 3 minutes or less to a lay audience. So it's kind of a challenge. Think of the different colleges that are going to be represented today. And it's a progressive competition, and so it starts in the department or college level, and we have 2 finalists from each college who have progressed on to this competition today. And so you get to see the finalists. There are 4 prizes. The grand prize is $5,000 for first place, $2,500 for second, and $1,000 for third. Hopefully you've been able to pick up a ballot. They're at the doors. Please, if you haven't gotten one, go ahead and grab one. This is your way of helping us determine people's choice, which is also $1,000. And this is based purely off of your voting. And so as you vote for them or rank them or tell us if you think their performance was best or stuff like that, and turn them in when you leave. Don't forget to turn them in. And in this way, we will determine who wins people's choice. And that one, of course, will be announced later because we'll have to tally the ballots after. And so the rules are up here. You can see it's kind of a challenge. It's an oral presentation mainly as the focus. So there's a single slide that you'll be able to see behind them as they present, but no animation, no additional media or props, and they're limited to 3 minutes. If they go over 3 minutes, they are disqualified. And so we are grateful to have you all here today. The decisions are final from the judges, and I'm going to introduce them right now. So we've got Spencer Magleby from engineering. He's going to wave to you. He's not going to turn around. Tom Cederberg from physical and mathematical sciences. Nancy Wentworth, she works in Center for Teaching and Learning. Ed Carter from Fine Arts and Communications. Sean Miller from Family, Home, and Social Sciences. We've got Dean Wynn Sterling from Graduate Studies, and Brad Niger from Life Sciences. Great. And so, without further ado, we will start by introducing our first competitor, Sierra Baird. She's getting her PhD in counseling psychology. Her presentation is titled The Look, and her advisor is Lane Fisher.
The most recent U.S. statistic reports over 67,000 cases of child sexual abuse a year. Those are just the cases that are reported. There are many more that go unreported. This is a huge problem. Our research team here at BYU is addressing this problem. As a group of therapists, we are interested in how people make meaningful changes in their lives. So how do you know if someone is at risk for sexually offending against children? There's always self-report, but given the sensitive nature of the topic and the stigma associated with it, self-report is unlikely. But there's another way. There's a body of research that supports that people will look longer at images of people that they find sexually attractive. This is called viewing time, and this is where my research comes into play. With the help of my research team and my husband, who's a computer programmer, I developed an iPad app that measures viewing time. It's called The Look. Participants go through 150 images of people whose ages range from infant to older adult, and as they go through each image, they rate the image based on that person's sexual attractiveness. But what's covertly being measured is the amount of time they spend viewing each image. When the test is complete, and it takes about 7 minutes on average, a graph is then generated which shows which age groups the person spent the longest time viewing. I tested The Look here at BYU, and we got the expected reference patterns, which basically means the graphs for people who are not sexually interested in children and who don't have a history of offending against children. We plan to use this data in the near future as we compare it against incarcerated sex offenders. The second part of my research was to get the reliability of the tool. So we had the participants come back 2 weeks later and take the test again. Our numbers were extremely high. We found that the males were 98% reliable, and the females were 100% reliable, time 1 to time 2. This is amazing. We hope that by being able to measure a person's sexual attraction patterns, we can then intervene with adults who are at risk for sexually abusing children. So we can help them make meaningful changes in their lives, and by doing so, we can keep kids safe from sexual abuse. Thank you.
Have you ever stopped to think about just how amazing it is that with only 26 letters in our Latin alphabet, we can make myriad words, sentences, even books, words enough to fill the entire internet. And they can be for different purposes, too. Anything from writing a love letter to typing your email to your coworker to ordering your next textbook on Amazon. All these things can be done with the same 26 symbols. Now get this. You can do the same sort of thing with protein. Now, I'm not just talking muscle, milk, and steak here. I'm talking about the proteins in your body. The proteins that are as diverse as the antibodies that fight off disease, to the enzymes that catalyze chemical reactions in your body, to, the fibers that make up your muscles. So, what if you could add an extra sort of building block onto these proteins? After all, like words, proteins are made up of a finite set of building blocks called amino acids. There are, after all, only 20 of them. Well, it'd be kind of like adding a hashtag onto a regular English word. Hashtag protein. Suddenly, it just became tweetable. Now, this is the very question that I consider in my research every day. But what happened if you could add an extra block? So, why is this important? Well, in 2012, one of the biggest, most important drugs on the market for cancer was called Herceptin. Herceptin is a protein designed to be a secret stealth killer of cancer tumors in breast cancer patients. There is, however, one problem. Herceptin, like many other medicines on the market, when it travels through the bloodstream to hit its target, is itself intercepted and degraded by the body. Enter amino acids, the unnatural sort. If you coat this protein in an unnatural amino acid sheath, its half-life dramatically increases in the bloodstream, thus allowing it to hit its target more often and improving the life of the breast cancer patient. Our laboratory has already succeeded in coating each protein with one type at a time of unnatural amino acid. In the last 2 weeks, I personally participated in the design of a system that would incorporate not just one, but 5 unnatural amino acids simultaneously and site-specifically in proteins. We hope that in the future, this will improve the future of medicine, food, and other chemical products. All things, in short, that are made of protein. One amino acid at a time. And that is something to tweet about. Thank you very much.
I'll never forget the first time I diagnosed a child with autism. The parents were very emotional and overwhelmed. They asked me many questions. Things like, what will my child's future be like? Will my child be able to get a job, get married? Unfortunately, our current diagnostic tools don't allow us to answer these questions. It's frustrating for me as a psychologist, but it's even more frustrating for parents who want to know how to help their child. We need better diagnostic tools. There are several things we know about autism that can help us improve diagnosis. First, we know that when individuals with autism are in the womb, the connections in their brain don't form properly, leading to differences in brain size and activity. We also know that autism is genetic, meaning it runs in families. And we know that individuals with autism have a hard time processing errors. Error processing is important because we need to recognize we've made a mistake in order to change our behavior and avoid making mistakes again in the future. In order to improve diagnosis, we need a way to combine this information about genes, brain activity, and symptoms to identify markers of autism. One way to do this is using the EEG. The EEG measures electrical activity in the brain. We've used the EEG to examine error processing and brain activity in autism. So to understand how we measure error processing, imagine that you're playing basketball. The game is tied, and you go to make the winning shot, and as the ball leaves your hands, you realize you shot at the wrong hoop. Well, within 100 milliseconds of making that error, we know that there's increased activity in the brain. That's really fast. That means that before the ball even leaves your hands, your brain recognizes that you're about to make an error. Well, we found that children with autism had decreased error-related brain activity, supporting the idea that differences in the brain are associated with difficulty processing errors in autism. The goal of my project is to see if this runs in families. To do this, I'm going to use the EEG to examine error processing in parents and siblings of children with autism. If it does run in families, we expect to see similar patterns of reduced brain activity following errors in relatives. This can then be used as a marker to improve diagnosis and treatment. Now, imagine I just told you that your child has autism. But this time we have better diagnostic tools. So instead of feeling frustrated, you feel empowered to help your child build their strengths and overcome their challenges. Thank you.
Any teacher of a second or foreign language knows that when they ask their students to write, it's very common that their students produce a piece of text that is full of grammar errors. And sometimes these errors can be so abundant or so severe that a reader cannot even understand what the author was trying to convey. This naturally leads to the question for second or foreign language teachers, how can I address this problem in my classrooms? A few years ago, two of BYU's own professors, Dr. Norman Evans and Dr. James Hartshorn, conducted research on this very question, and they developed a method called dynamic written corrective feedback. Now let me briefly explain to you how this method works. 4 days a week for 10 minutes per day, students in a second language class write, and they produce about 1 paragraph. The teacher collects this paragraph and marks it using special codes that signify grammar errors. The teacher returns the marked paragraph to the student, who then rewrites it, incorporating the feedback given. The new paragraph is then given again to the teacher, who marks it again using the same codes and returns it to the student, who rewrites it once again. And this process can continue on until the student has produced the draft 100% grammatically accurate or free of error. Now, as you can imagine, this method was extremely effective when it was researched in 2008. However, it is very time-consuming, and in fact, some literature has even called it cumbersome. When the students rewrite the paragraphs, they have 1 week in which they can produce an error-free draft. So this potentially means that the student can rewrite the draft 4 or 5 times, and a teacher can remark the draft 4 or 5 times, so it's very time-consuming. Now, this is where my research comes in. My research looked at a method of dynamic written corrective feedback dramatically modified with the primary objective of making it less time-consuming and therefore more manageable for everyone involved. One of the primary modifications made to the method I researched was that instead of being allowed to rewrite the paragraph 4 or 5 times, students were limited to only 2 rewrites. And now behind me you can see the results. That these 2 lines show the 2 groups who received dynamic written corrective feedback, both the original method and the modified method, which was less time-consuming. And as you can see, the gains in second language grammatical accuracy were virtually parallel between the 2 groups. This suggests that dynamic written corrective feedback is an effective process for improving students' grammatical accuracy in their second language writing, and that helping our students to achieve error-free writing is indeed possible in their second language. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a staple of communications theory that people absorb the messages contained in their media. And if you stop and think about that for a second, that's pretty scary. Media containing violence, sexuality, and substance use can increase aggression levels among consumers, as well as push the chance of early sexual initiation and drug abuse among young people. In other words, what media tell us can alter our perceptions of reality and our interactions with it. Now, interestingly, academic studies of pop music messages almost exclusively focus on the images in music videos. And those few studies that concentrate on the lyrics of songs almost always go after the low-hanging fruit, rap and heavy metal. These genres serve as the whipping boys of lyrical analysis, leaving other genres untouched. Country music especially seems to constantly get handed a get-out-of-jail-free card, and no systematic analysis of the lyrical content in country songs has ever been undertaken. As country becomes increasingly mainstream and incorporates more elements of generic pop, we would expect to find an increase in the number of songs with violence, sex, and substance use, consistent with similar increases across other genres. Now, my research is to undertake a systematic analysis of the lyrical content in country songs. I'm currently in the process of coding the lyrics of Billboard magazine's top 1,000 country songs between 1994 and 2013. Using an established coding parameter developed by lyric analysts, I intend to categorize and code these lyrics against the 4 categories of violence, sex, degrading sex, and substance use, as per the specific definitions provided by the coding parameter. For example, whether a lyric qualifies as incidental or a more potent degrading sexual reference is dependent upon whether there is a power differential expressed between sex partners in the song and whether one partner is objectified by the other. As another example of the coding process, a lyric that appears in the chorus of a song will be coded as many times as that chorus is repeated, since repetitive messages are more likely to affect the subconscious. Now, if the findings are anything similar to a pilot study that a colleague and myself conducted 2 years ago, we're going to find some unsettling results. In that study, we examined a smaller sampling of country songs and found that in just 20 years, the number of country songs featuring substance use associated with sex had doubled. So had the number of songs featuring sexually degrading references, and most interestingly, the number of songs in that 20-year period featuring alcohol consumption had more than tripled. Now, hopefully this research will shed some light on the increasing homogenization of pop music messages, as well as alert consumers as to what it is they're really listening to and what messages they may be allowing into their subconscious. Thank you.
There's a common misconception that as we get older, our brains turn into this hardened, unchanging organ. But in reality, that's not the case. Every day, our brain changes in minor ways according to our environment and our circumstances. Take this fellow, for example, the addict. The pleasure and reward pathway in his brain has not only changed, it's been hijacked. You see, a loving Father in heaven created us to feel pleasure. It's a good thing. It helps us tolerate, survive, and enjoy this sometimes hostile world. But when we introduce drugs of addiction to this system, everything changes. So how do we monitor these changes in the brain so that we can develop treatments for addicts and tailor therapies accordingly? The proposition of my mentor and I, biomarkers. And you might wonder, what's a biomarker and why should I care? A biomarker is like a little red flag inside your body that tells you what's going on with a certain gene, protein, organ, etc. And what's so exciting about my research is that we found a biomarker, or a protein in the brain, that allows us to track an addict's addictive state. The only problem is that up until now, the only way to do this was through a technique called PET scanning. The average PET scan costs $850 to $4,000. You have to inject radioactive chemicals into your blood for it to work, and you have to live near a machine called a cyclotron, which is very rare and expensive to operate. So at best, PET scans are research tools. So my mentor and I then asked, well, is there a better way to track this biomarker or protein for clinical use? And the answer that we found is the blood. Surprisingly, the same biomarker that exists in our brain exists in our blood, and it changes when exposed to drugs of abuse. So I'm currently in the process of verifying that the changes we see happening in the blood are the same as the changes that happen in the brain. And if they are, we will have found a revolutionarily cheaper but just as effective method of tracking an addict's addictive state. This would allow primary and secondary healthcare officials to get involved in drug development, monitoring, and therapy for a fraction of the cost. And the research implications don't have to stop with monitoring an addict's addictive state? What about Parkinson's disease? What about Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases that vex the baby boomer generation? Are you catching a glimpse for how exciting some of the research going on at BYU is? I hope that the secrets of the brain will further be illuminated by what's hiding in our blood. Thank you.
How many of you have a textbook with you here today? Maybe it's weighing down your backpack. Perhaps you're a lucky one who has it filed away in your Kindle. What if you discovered that your textbook had a sinister hidden agenda? It sounds like maybe that could be the makings of a rather boring spy film. But actually, what if there was meaning behind the methodology and the ideology used by the people who wrote and designed your textbook? Well, that's what I'm trying to discover. And because within my program I specialize in the second language acquisition track, the basis for my problem comes from the literature that's in the linguistics and teaching English to speakers of other languages field. And I'm focusing on textbooks of English to students in mainland China. And what we've discovered in looking through the literature is that there's a lot of conflict between how English should be taught, ideally with our goals, and how it is being taught and what's going on in the classroom. And there's a lot of work going on to find out why that discrepancy exists. We've looked at teacher and student attitudes, access to resources, and there's a lot of possibilities coming up, but not a lot of concrete answers. So I decided to look at a really basic educational technology, the textbook. I chose 10 titles that were used as typical textbooks in Jiangsu province, China, and analyzed them using a method, a qualitative method known as grounded theory, in which we look at the data itself and see what themes emerge. Now, interestingly, within this data, within the textbooks themselves, we saw 6 different themes emerging, and as these emerged, the textbooks fell into 2 categories, a majority paradigm and a minority paradigm as to how they addressed these different themes. For example, the majority, more Chinese-based paradigm, which was 8 of the 10 textbooks, would tend to present communication of meaning as a direct translation, 1 paragraph in English, 1 in Chinese. Whereas the minority paradigm would approach that and say, why don't we let students infer some meaning? Why do we not let there be every answer spelled out? But interestingly enough, these also fell into some situations where we had what we called methodological sabotage between the 2 paradigms of textbooks. For example, the majority paradigm was publishing companion books to a more standardized minority paradigm book and giving word-for-word answers to what were intended to be open-ended questions. So we have a little bit of discrepancy going on here. We can't say for certain that this is going to make or break the English learner's experience in China, but it does definitely open the door for further examination, especially of textbooks as a factor in the classroom environment. And who knows, maybe we will have the makings of a rather exciting spy film after all. Thank you.
Giving birth to a child is a time of celebration, isn't it? Well, unfortunately, that's not the case for many families out there. Globally, every year, over 75,000 mothers and 500,000 babies die due to this. Preeclampsia is world's 2nd leading cause of maternal deaths. Symptoms of preeclampsia include high blood pressure, excess of proteins in urine, swelling of body parts like face, hand, foot, all happening in mother's body during her pregnancy. So now one would think, okay, why can't we just give some medication and treat this disorder, right? Well, there is a problem. And the problem is we can treat a disease only if we know what causes that disease, what happens in the body that produces all these weird symptoms. Now, the next obvious question would be, so what causes preeclampsia? And well, that's a $1 million question. We don't know yet. Preeclampsia is still referred as disease of theories. Many theories have been put forward to explain the cause of preeclampsia, but none of them have been proved till date. And that's what my job as a researcher is, to investigate which of the speculated theories or factors do actually contribute in causing preeclampsia. All we know about this disease is that something abnormal happens in mother's placenta that causes these symptoms like hypertension to appear. So all you brave people who have seen deliveries or placentas would know that placenta is that temporary organ in pregnancy which is attached to the mother's body and is the main source of nutrition for the growing little baby. So it looks really gross, but it's a very important organ. So I took normal, healthy human placentas and added conditions believed to cause preeclampsia. I observed that these conditions cause changes in protein concentration in those placentas. Those proteins that changed in concentration will now be compared to proteins in placentas obtained from actual, real preeclamptic pregnancies, and that would indicate which of the believed preeclamptic conditions that I externally added is actually responsible for causing preeclampsia. To conclude, statistics suggest that many deaths due to preeclampsia occurred because preeclampsia wasn't diagnosed at the right time or wasn't diagnosed at all. So at this point of time, the least we all could do is spread awareness about this disease. Think how important that could be for your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you. When I was about 5 years old, I remember watching in television a scene of pain and torture. I was standing there transfixed for a time, but I remember running back into my parents' empty bedroom, burying my head in a pillow as I was gripped with this terror. I had an awakening. I knew for the first time my own mortality. I had this emotional comprehension of pain, and I felt this desolation and barrenness of soul that I could not express at that time. When I started my graduate studies here last semester, I came across the works of two very influential philosophers on the topic of the sublime. They are Edmund Burke and Immanuel Kant. Now, they talk about the sublime as being more than beauty and transcendence. They talk about it as having states of awe and astonishment, and very closely tied to that, the state of terror or privation, the privation of light, the terror of darkness, the privation of things, the terror of emptiness, the privation of language, the terror of silence, the privation of others, the terror of solitude, and the privation of life, the terror of death. And so the mundane, as you take away all meaning and any variation in life, you're left with this profound sense of privation that can trigger the sense of the sublime. You can imagine how cathartic it was for me reading in words what for decades had been for me only an unspeakable sensation. That catharsis has since continued as I make images of mundane places and barren spaces as I try to capture the sublime. The lines and the planes suggest a space that you can enter into, but the bleakness of the surface, the sheerness of the surface prevent any kind of visual entrance in there. The columns I use ash to make. They evoke this image of joss sticks burning in a Buddhist temple back home. And ash, the great signifier of death, is also a material used to point to the divine and to rebirth and renewal. So you have transcendence right here. You have the mundane right here. How can these two opposites be sublime? Can an image like this produce the same sort of effect as a monumental painting of a tempest, for example? So this picture is just one of many attempts that I have to try to discover just that. There's a special magic in art. It could imply answers to concealed questions. And as I've been making these paintings, I've come to a better understanding of what I went through during that time as a kid. And I've also gained a greater appreciation and awareness of the sublime in daily living. And it is my honest hope that those who see these pictures may feel the same way. Thank you.
The need for high-performance materials is something we're all familiar with. Airline tickets are expensive, smartphone screens crack, transmissions break, and the list goes on. For example, if we could run commercial jet engines just 1 degree hotter, it would save almost 1 billion liters of jet fuel per year globally, or $670 million. The limiting factor is the material used for the turbine blade. Synthesizing new materials is difficult. There are 30 trillion possible materials that can be made by mixing 4 different elements from the periodic table. One of these could be the next turbine blade or smartphone screen. The problem is that trying them all out by hand would take all the physicists in the United States 447 million years to do. The solution is to get supercomputers to try them all for us. Then we could identify the best material from a list created by the computer. This idea of using computers to predict materials has been around for a while, but so far not so successful. The key ingredient, which is still missing, is a good computational model to make the predictions. With some effort, quantum physics can be used to predict the properties of materials. Unfortunately, many of the new materials predicted so far were impossible to make. The scientists knew where to put the atoms in a picture like this, but couldn't get them to go like that in real life. So what can we do differently? Instead of inventing materials to match properties, we develop computer code to list the properties of every possible material. We create the list by taking stable structures we already know about, like this one, and substituting other chemicals from the periodic table into that same shape. Then we do the quantum physics on the new structure to determine its properties. Because the original structure already exists in nature, there is a much higher probability that the one with the replaced chemicals will be possible to make. In essence, we change the problem of inventing to a problem of characterizing. Because of its generality, the implications of this research are truly tremendous. Every year, engineers search for thousands of materials for new or existing applications. Many of these applications may directly impact your life. A database of essentially all possible materials and their properties would be astounding. That is why I study computational models for the characterization of novel materials. Thank you.
In 1977, a Ugandan nurse named Regina Amolo wrote her first novel. Set in a tiny village, it told the story of a traditional African mother struggling to raise a modern daughter while coping with an abusive husband and his demands for a son. When she had finished writing, she contacted publishers but could find none willing to fund her publication of her story. She later recalled, "It seemed I had reached the end of my road." 20 years later, Regina was listening to the radio and heard an ad for a new writers' association in Uganda called FemWrite. The very next day, Regina was on FemWrite's doorstep, manuscript in hand. And 22 years after its creation, Regina's novel, A Season of Mirth, was finally published. This writing and publishing group, called FemWrite, was first created in 1996 by a small set of Ugandan women with 2 major goals: to develop women writers and to publish the stories of marginalized women. Since that time, FemWrite has published scores of novels, short stories, and memoirs, all written by and about African women. But despite FemWrite's success in East Africa, it remains virtually unknown in the rest of the world. I am currently working to remedy this problem. In Uganda this summer, I will interview FemWrite's writers in order to determine how FemWrite has been so successful in publishing the stories of Ugandan women. How has FemWrite managed to create a thriving community of female writers completely non-existent only 2 decades ago? How has creating this community empowered hundreds of women across East Africa? And how do both the fiction and nonfiction of FemWrite inform our understanding of the struggles and the triumphs of Ugandan women? Now, most of the stories that we hear about Uganda are news reports of its 20-year civil war or Joseph Kony's army of child soldiers. What FemWrite offers instead are the startlingly hopeful voices of Uganda's women living under oppressive patriarchy, poverty, AIDS, and war. As the vehicle for their voices, FemWrite deserves to be the focus of direct study. My research will help Western scholars to begin to engage with this new female literary culture growing in Uganda today. It will help us understand how women dedicated to literature can improve their lives and the society around them. FemWrite allows all of us to hear the voices of real Ugandans in real time And it allows us to hear the stories of women like Regina Amolo, both the stories they have written and the stories they have lived. Thank you.
This child, who could be your daughter, sister, friend, or niece, has a 1 in 3 chance of developing diabetes over her lifetime, a 50% chance of developing heart disease. Sadly, our current healthcare system is poorly equipped to handle these conditions. The United States spends 2 to 3 times as much on healthcare as any other developed nations, and yet we have worse health outcomes and lower life expectancy to show for it. Our healthcare system was built to treat acute illnesses like influenza and pneumonia, and yet it's struggling to grapple with the rising tide of chronic conditions like obesity and diabetes. Prevention is the best solution to stem that rising tide. The Affordable Care Act is the most recent legislative attempt to fix our healthcare system. While prevention is an important component of the law, consultation with experts are needed to produce effective change in the system. Public health professionals are experts in prevention and population health. They are trained to assess, plan, implement, and evaluate public health programs, as well as advocate and communicate for health. Despite this need for expert consultation, until my research, there had been no investigation into what public health professionals actually think about the Affordable Care Law. Through a nationwide survey, I was able to ask them those questions, and I found out that they're largely supportive of the ACA. In fact, they believe that the law will improve the quality of health care while decreasing the cost, and that the country as a whole will be better off as a result. They're quite knowledgeable on the widely known provisions for under the law, things like the insurance mandate and the elimination of pre-existing conditions. I gave these professionals a list of specific provisions interspersed with common myths, and I asked them, are they part of the law or not? For most provisions, the public health professionals got the answer correct more often than the general public, suggesting that they are more knowledgeable about the law. Unfortunately, along with many Americans, they're confused when it comes to common myths, things like death panels and Medicare cuts. They are also less certain when it comes to lesser-known provisions like insurance company rebates and the expansion of the healthcare workforce. Public health professionals have the skills, training, and expertise to improve and fix our broken healthcare system through the expansion of prevention. My findings show that more education is needed among this profession before they are ready to step up to that challenge, advocate for change, and prevent chronic disease for this little girl. Thank you.
Many of you are familiar with the statistics that indicate the massive presence pornography has taken in modern life. Some pornographic websites, such as the popular site YouPorn, stream at as much as 6 times the bandwidth of other popular video sites like Hulu. While many people do not mind this phenomenon, there are thousands of others who believe that pornography addictions are destroying their lives and families. Consider individuals like author Michael Lay, who was driven to the brink of suicide by his pornography addiction and was saved only by thoughts of his children and the legacy that he would be leaving behind. In order to help people like Michael, dozens of organizations have devoted their practices to combating pornography addictions. Unfortunately, little research has been done to assist these professionals in their work, and according to some sources, their success rates suffer at a mere 10%. These therapists need more evidence-based tools. For example, one tool used by therapists to combat other addictions is the understanding of contributing mental factors, such as depression and impulsiveness. By understanding these factors, therapists are allowed to treat an addiction at its source instead of its side effect. I hypothesize that if such conditions preceded other addictions, they might also precede pornography habits. Using data gathered in the new family structure study, I was able to conduct an analysis determining whether depression and impulsiveness, as well as a few other mental health conditions, were indeed correlated with high pornography use. My study yielded 2 interesting results. First, as hypothesized, pornography was correlated with similar mental health conditions as those preceding other addictions. This is useful, but not unexpected. My second finding, however, was a little more interesting. Pornography use was also correlated with another addiction not associated with another condition not associated with other addictions, attachment anxiety. Understanding this will allow therapists to treat a pornography addiction at one of its sources instead of its side effects, because this suggests that pornography might be caused by a lack of social attachment in other areas of a person's life. While my research is still young enough that we can't quite take all of our results too conclusively, and we need a little more refining, it does have the potential to provide some powerful tools to pornography addiction therapists. Thank you.
Okay, let's say that I walk into the doctor's office today because I'm feeling sick. In most cases, the doctor will simply look me over and give me some sort of a diagnosis based on my symptoms. Because lab work is so difficult, time-consuming, and expensive, we often diagnose today solely based on our symptoms. We do not actually identify the diseases inside our bodies. Now, imagine I walk into the doctor's office 20 years from now. It might be a little different. There they might have some sort of a new handheld device, similar to the tricorder device used in Star Trek, where they simply deposit a drop of my blood on the device and it tells them immediately exactly what foreign agents are present in my blood. So that allows for a much more exact diagnosis. My research is working on making a device just like that. We call it a lab-on-a-chip biosensor. With our biosensor, we'll be able to detect any type of particle within a sample, meaning you run blood through this device and it can tell you whether there are any particles of a certain type, even one inside, including cancerous cells, viruses, or even bacteria. So how does this work? This figure right here shows the overall diagram and setup for my chip. A sample is introduced and runs through the blue hollow channel from one side of the chip to the other. We then turn on a laser, represented here by the green arrow. The particles inside the sample will pass through the laser light, where the red circle is, and that will cause the particles to light up. We can then detect that light where it says detect in red and identify the particle. There are three major advantages to this design. One of them is the cost. We build our biosensors right here on campus in the BYU clean room using very repeatable processes. This allows for cheap production. Two, their size. This picture right here shows a completed biosensor sitting on top of a quarter. Their small size makes it possible to integrate them into a handheld device. And three, the hollow channel shown here in blue. It creates a closed system for us, which allows us to run a liquid through it, but is also still capable of guiding light through it. This is actually a very unique optical property that we have. So results. We've already seen some incredible results detecting larger particles with our devices. But if we're going to detect viruses, which are about 1,000 times smaller than the average width of a human hair, then there is still need for improvement. That's what I'm working on for my research. And we have several ideas that we're currently testing that should allow us to detect particles as small as viruses. I wish I had more time to talk to you about those ideas, but I only have a few more seconds. My hope is, though, that when our biosensors are ready, they will improve our world's ability to identify and therefore treat illnesses, helping us to live long and prosper. Thank you.
Okay, those were wonderful presentations. Let's give them a round of applause again. We really appreciate their hard work and effort. And while the judges are calculating this, their last scores here, we will actually have the results for you in just a few minutes after the judges are done. We want to thank you again for coming. This is the 3M tier 3-minute thesis, again, where they present their thesis in 3 minutes to a lay audience. So kind of an amazing feat. We just want to thank all those who made this event possible today. A lot of graduate studies staff have put in a lot of time and effort. If we can give them a hand, especially for the food. So. We also want to thank all of the judges again for coming and helping us today. A lot of them either represent colleges or have put in time to help us with this event, so we're really grateful for them if we can give them a hand. We now want to bring all of the competitors up to the stage. We want to thank each of you for all the time and effort that you've put in, and I can't calculate how long it's taken you, but all of them have at least gone through one competition to get here. And so these are the first and second place winners of their colleges. And so that takes a lot of time and effort, and have revised it now and come to the university competition. You've seen the polished results, and they've been great. So we've got a gift for each of you, and we just want to thank you for coming. Will you go up and... I just want to mention for the last time, I promise, the People's Choice Award. Again, this is determined by you as an audience, so please fill out these slips if you have not. Even if you've just seen a few of them, go ahead and do that for them. Turn them in at the end, and that way then we'll be able to calculate in a few days. We'll get that results to our contestants, as well as to you. If you want to know, we'll put it on our Facebook page, on our website. Just try and get that information out.
So while we're waiting, why don't you tell us again who you are?
My name is Keith Evans. I'm from the College of Fine Arts and Communications, and I am studying a content analysis of country music lyrics.
I'm Sierra Barrett from the Counseling Psychology Department, and we're studying a tool for viewing time.
I'm Andrew Broadbent from Chemical Engineering, studying unnatural amino acids in proteins.
I'm Ann Clausen from Clinical Psychology, and I'm studying electrophysiological endophenotypes in autism spectrum disorders.
I'm Ben Thornell from the College of... social work, Masters of Social Work. I'm studying mental health correlates of high pornography use.
I'm Annika Garcia from the School of Education in Instructional Psychology and Technology, and I was analyzing the ideology behind English language textbooks in mainland China.
Eddington. I am with Linguistics and English Language studying TESOL, and my thesis is looking at grammar correction and improving written grammatical accuracy in second language writing.
My name is Ryan Folsom. I'm with life science, neuroscience, and I'm studying monitoring and tracking of addictive states and potential biomarkers for other neurological diseases.
Hi, my name is King. I'm from the Visual Arts Department, and I deal with themes of the sublime and the mundane in my art.
My name is Konrad Rosenbrock. I'm doing a PhD in physics, and we build computational models to predict the properties of every possible material.
My name is Tom Wall. I'm studying electrical engineering, and my research is in single bioparticle detection.
I'm Candace Stratford in the English department, and I'm studying women's literature in Uganda.
I'm Jessica Strong in Life Sciences, and I'm studying public health professionals' knowledge of the Affordable Care Act.
I'm Komal Kedia from Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and we're trying to figure out a mechanism for a fatal disorder of pregnancy known as preeclampsia.
Okay, so we will be presenting the first, second, and third prize today. If you are one of the lucky winners, then we need some information from you, so we'll need to see you afterwards. And again, we do have participation gifts for each one of you. We want to thank you very much for doing this. One of the things that we've wanted to highlight in graduate studies is the wonderful work that is being done in many labs and in the colleges and in the departments. And we really want to get the word out to the community at large so that BYU in general, the undergraduate studies, and all of our auxiliary offices and departments can be as proud as we are in graduate studies of the wonderful work that is being done. So thank you very much. Okay, do we have all right, so we'll start with a third prize winner, and the third prize winner will receive a $1,000 check. Okay, Thomas Wall. Yeah, come on now. Again, thank you, judges. Some of them may need to leave, so if you need to leave, we understand. So if you'll take us over and get some. Okay, so our second prize winner. I don't know who it is. Okay, so this winner is from Physical and Mathematical Sciences, and it goes to Conrad. Conrad Rosenbrock. Congratulations. Go to the table, I'll get some information. Okay, for our grand prize winner, so Conrad receives a prize of $2,500. I almost said $25,000. Our first prize winner, the winner of a $5,000 prize, goes to Keith Evans. Okay, again, thank you very much for coming. This has been a pilot project for us and certainly our first experience doing this. We've received wonderful feedback and we appreciate your support.